It's time for the KickAround, the Ticket's weekly show all about soccer. 2 hours of HSOs on the clubs, leagues, and tournaments of the world's game. It doesn't matter if you're new to the sport, don't worry. This is the Ticket. We're just kicking it around. Now, here's two guys hoping for short shorts to come back in style. Andy Swift and Peter Welton.
Here's Diego Luna now. Luna, great dance, Luna!
This is just spectacular from Diego Luna. Switching the point of attack from Tillman, and then boom, back to the near post. As pure a strike as you can see, but just love the confidence of Diego Luna off the back of the early goal, taking the responsibility and finishing the play, giving the U.S. a 2-0 cushion.
Hi-ho, P1s, and welcome to the KickAround Saturdays 2 to 4 here on Sports Radio 96.7 and 1310, The Ticket, where you, the good P1, sits around, talks some soccer and all that implies. Hi, it is me, Peter. And this is the last of the Andy-less shows, as he will return next week. But as I have said, I have a much-beloved deep well of soccer-talking friends. So via the miracle of the internet, to my left but to your right as you stare into the radio, it is your favorite Norwegian soccer journalist and mine, Lars Sivertsen. Howdy, Lars.
Hello. Off the bench, ready to go.
You are here, Lars. In fact, it's time for your theme song.
Lars.
Yes.
I only get to do this.
Still haven't been able to turn this into my alarm clock, but I do think that is a viable concept. I think that would freak me out in the morning.
Have I failed to send that sound file to you? Is that why you haven't?
Oh, please do later today, yes.
Okay.
I can wake up every morning to that and forever be troubled by it. Yeah. Off the bench. Or maybe I'm not usually on the bench. Maybe I'm just like someone who turns up on loan in the off season for some other league. You know, like when Landon Donovan went to Everton and everyone had a really good time. It'll be one of those things.
No, you're a full timer here, Lars.
Okay.
You're
fine.
You're more than Landon at Everton. You're much more serious. You're our Brian McBride at Fulham, is what you are, sir.
Okay, yes, I like that.
We're going to name our corner bar after you someday. Yes, Lars, we have much to discuss today. Since you are here, we will get into the Club World Cup and that unbelievably interesting game that just finished up about, 40 minutes ago between PSG and Bayern Munich with the horrific incident that took place just on the strike of halftime. Good Lord. And then when you thought it couldn't get any more interesting than that, the game got way more interesting than that as it went on. We'll also get into transfers and all kinds of good stuff like that. But let's start with the most... Oh, wait, and let me also promote this. The good Buzz Carrick is going to be in studio in the second hour. We'll talk about the U.S. men's national team. And Buzz will hold some FC Dallas group therapy, because we all need that in the worst of ways. Let's do the most serious and important of all the soccer segments. Oh, the volume is so bad on my thing. Sorry about that, guys. All right, Lars, so I knew a couple days ago this segment was going to be no fun because we do have to start the segment with the saddest and most tragic of all the things that have happened in soccer in quite a while. The unexpected waking up, was it Thursday morning, to the news, seeing that Diego Jota had died in a car accident with his brother, is one of those deals in modern times where you look at it and you're like, okay, this can't be right. And now you spend the next 30 minutes trying to double check and make sure the story is real. And unfortunately, it did happen.
Yeah, it was one of those things that the way things have gone on social media, we're exposed to so many very fabricated news stories that make us click on certain links and stuff that I honestly first thing thought it was one of those. Like, this can't be true. But no, the news is that Diogo Jota, the Liverpool attacker, died in a car crash alongside his brother. He was traveling from his home in Portugal, and this might seem odd to people who are not that familiar with European geography, but he had recently had a minor operation to his lung, nothing serious, but a small thing, and he was advised by his doctors not to fly, which is apparently something he would sometimes avoid. Instead of flying to the UK from Portugal, he would drive from Portugal to the northern coast of Spain and get a ferry from there. There's a car ferry that travels from there. So he was traveling from his home home, not far from Porto, I believe, in northern Portugal, driving across the northern Iberian Peninsula with his brother. They were driving in the evening to avoid the worst heat, to make it a more comfortable trip. They were planning on taking a stop to rest. They were being very responsible with it, and they were expected then to take the ferry across the Bay of Biscay up to Britain. We don't know for sure what happened yet. What has been suggested by the local authorities was that they may have burst a tire as they were overtaking. And as these athletes often do, they were driving a Lamborghini, a sports car, and which appears to have caught fire very rapidly, and none of the two brothers, unfortunately, survived. And listen, all accidents like that are absolutely heartbreaking, but this is particularly tough for details such as the fact that he got married just 11 days earlier to his childhood sweetheart, with whom he has 3 children. It's just absolutely grueling, and it would be bad whatever person it was, but this was also a player who was very well liked, who was jovial, who had very professional attitude, was a popular member of the dressing room. So just a terrible blow to Liverpool, to everyone who knew him, and the sport as a whole, really.
It is interesting to watch these things happen, and it does give you a moment to at least appreciate that in these times like this, the community of the sport in general really tends to gel together, because seeing the outpouring of admiration and honor and respect from rival clubs and rival players was really good to see, and also the heartbreak of watching so many of his Portuguese teammates just have a really tough time, because some of those guys are currently playing in tournaments and things right now, and man, it's been a tough watch over the last few days to see how all this goes, and it will continue to be that way, especially when Liverpool kick off their season in what is less than 2 months from now.
Yes, and it is. It's a funny, because it might seem irrational for even for fans to be as engaged by this, but when you think about it, these athletes, they do end up taking up a large spot in our lives. If you're a massive Liverpool fan, you will have spent probably more hours the last couple of years watching Diogo Jota play football than you've spent with some members of your family. And these characters end up occupying a big space in our heads, and you form emotional connections. I mean, of course, you don't actually know what they're like, but you've seen interviews and you've seen how they behave on the pitch, and you do form a connection in that sense. And it is, yeah, it becomes a loss to everyone. So yeah, it's just absolutely heartbreaking.
Well, and it also triple hurts, because Jota was by and large an incredibly likable sports person and sports player. It wasn't it wasn't one of those guys that people love to hate. He was just a likable player, fun to watch, whether he was at Wolves or any of his previous clubs or at Liverpool. He was that kind of guy. Now, on the other hand, the other big story, which really started to break yesterday, but has been a long-standing kind of secret, I don't know what the right word for it is the fact
an
open secret that Thomas Partey, the Arsenal midfielder, has now formally been charged with sexual assault and several counts of rape. So
yeah,
I know this over here stateside, I think my perception came as quite a surprise to a lot of people, because this hasn't been discussed, and we'll get into why that is for a bit. But this is a story that dates back to 2021, 2022, and has been, as Lars said, an open secret for a while. But Lars, help us over here understand why the libel laws in the UK are so different, and hence why this has not been reported openly in the media over there.
Well, the very, very simplified version of this is that in the UK, arrested suspects, they essentially have a right to anonymity, a right to privacy, until such a time as they're charged with a crime. If you're just if there's just been a complaint, if you're just a suspect, that doesn't have to be made public. And of course, the media then is not allowed to name people. And the laws extend into the trial period. I mean, it's extremely important to stress that in the UK, it's not legal to pontificate about the case in any direction or other. And you can be held in contempt of court. And if you work in the media or you have a big social media following and you express an opinion on the case one way or another, you can actually be punished and ultimately theoretically go to prison for that. Now, that's not something that happens, but it is a thing. So you'll notice that there's not going to be a lot of discourse about this case. There's just going to be very factual reporting on what has happened, and that is all you can really do. And it creates a very difficult situation when you have, I mean, this is the least important thing in this story, let me just say, but for us who cover the sport, this has been an open secret for years, for 3.5 years to be precise, that this was going on. But you're not really allowed to talk about it, and you're not really, and it kind of then becomes difficult to report on the sporting endeavors or otherwise of the players in question. And I've really been wrestling with this, and this is something that's now going to be a big topic: is have Arsenal handled this case correctly? Because of course he hasn't been suspended or anything, and his name has been kept private, but it is also, and we should start this conversation with the fact that you're innocent until proven guilty, right? That's an important principle in the world that I think we all believe in.
Here and there.
But at the same time, we have had a situation at Arsenal where it's been widely known that one of their players is a suspect in this kind of case, that he's been interviewed by police, I believe 7 times he's been questioned and been released on bail. And you think of something like how the female members of staff at Arsenal felt knowing that, and also seeing him walk through the door every morning and play in the team every week and be celebrated for his achievements. And something I suspect people will dig up is the fact that after back in 2022, he scored a goal against Tottenham in the derby, and after the game, Mikel Arteta said that he was very happy for him because of all he's been going through or some such, which is an extremely tone-deaf thing for a coach to say. It was upsetting at the time, and it becomes so much worse now when you can talk about it in its full context. Now, of course, these things aren't the most important things, but it will be a narrative in the days and weeks to come, I believe.
Well, it is, and then the other kind of weird twist to this story is that Partey's deal ran out at the end of June. But prior to that, Arsenal, there had been many reports that Arsenal was in talks in extending his deal, but the charges finally appeared. Now, I don't know if this is coincidence or not, or collusion, but the charges showing up after his deal expired with Arsenal is obviously another talking point that a lot of people have gotten into as to how all of this just kind of conveniently seemed to come together. It is a weird time because of all the things that you talked about. And from here over on the stateside, it is really weird because you can't possibly imagine 3 separate women coming out and making these accusations on a famous NFL, NBA hockey player, and it not being the cover story of every, headline of every sports magazine and TV show forever, as it happened many times in our country. So it's just treated very differently, and we'll have to see how this goes for the next few weeks, or if it tends to blow over. I guess some of it will depend on how the court case goes in his favor or against him.
Yeah, and I'm not here to say what's the right way and the wrong way of doing that, because I'll leave that to people who are a lot smarter than me. But I do want the listeners who maybe follow the English Premier League through the British media to know that it is absolutely not through complacency or negligence that this hasn't been discussed. It just legally hasn't been possible to do so. Yeah,
100%, because the stakes of being sued for that kind of stuff are so high in that country if you say the wrong thing, or even something that is perceived to be the wrong thing, and create all kinds of headaches for yourself, your parent company, and everybody else. It's in many ways, it's just not worth it. And I guess in some instances, there are times, like I think about the old Duke lacrosse team story that happened here decades ago in the United States. Maybe that kind of law would have gone a long way at helping out that situation. But anyway, so those are the 2 big stories. Real quick before we go, Lars, now that they have been exiled and ejected from the Club World Cup, do you have any sense that we are any closer to finding out the resolution with the Premier League of the 115 kabillion charges against Manchester City? Are we ever going to hear how that finishes out?
You're the one friend I have who keeps bringing this up, and I think that's I think that speaks well of you. You're diligent. A lot of people we're so bored of this story, and we just kind of want it to go away, or at least But no, we don't know, and I think it's a good sign that we don't know, because it's important that this procedure is done properly, that it's done behind closed doors. City have in the past attacked ruling bodies for supposedly leaking material related to proceedings against City, and have accused people of using the media to. So I think everyone involved with the proceedings against City are doing their absolute best to do this completely by the book, and it's one of the reasons we don't know anything yet. But the boring answer to that is that no, we don't know anything yet.
But isn't that what makes everybody suspicious, is that this is something they told us that would be resolved back in the winter, and now here we are past the spring, and we still don't know what's going on?
Well, these things take time. There are a lot of charges, and the City are challenging all of them with all the lawyers they can afford, which is many. It can take time to sort through these things. So I'd rather, as much as I would like information, I would rather have this be done completely by the book, completely confidential, without leaks, than the process being messy, and then whatever ruling we have, City would be in a position to challenge the legitimacy of it because the process itself was messy, if that makes sense.
It does. So, Lars, I think we are now done with the unfun stuff. Can we just talk about fun stuff from here on out?
We can. Can
we start?
Well, there is one more unfun stuff that we will inevitably get to.
Yeah.
Because when we get to the fun stuff, I mean, we'll get to the Club World Cup, I guess. But I have to say, as someone who's been a Club World Cup skeptic with a capital S and perhaps a capital septic as well, I must admit that the second half, the last half hour of PSG Bayern Munich is probably the most fun I've had watching this tournament. This is the first time this felt like a proper tournament, and I don't say that lightly. I'm against the concept as it has worked this summer. I want to come here and tell you all that it's bad, and a lot of it has been bad. But in truth, I was enjoying watching the last half hour of this game. It was good drama. There were the sporadic outbreaks of good soccer. So that was. But unfortunately, of course, that since we are in the unfun segment, that experience was also marred by a horrible injury to Jamal Musiala, the young Bayern Munich playmaker, the extent of which we don't quite know yet, but it looked an awful lot like a bad fracture just above the ankle.
As stated by somebody who has personal experience and said foot pointing the wrong way.
Yes, I've done that. It's unpleasant. It's unpleasant. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And with Musiala as well, he is a young guy. He's 22 years old. He's one of the most promising young sort of attacking midfielders around. He's been out with bad injuries before. Like, he's missed a lot of games already in his young career with injuries. A really bad muscle injury. He was out from April to June this year with a bad muscle injury. Like, he's had bad stuff. So having a really bad break now, which is what it looks like it is. I was kind of grasping at straws, writing in our chat that maybe it's just dislocated, but then you look at the replay and you think, don't think so.
No,
so we obviously wish him all the best, and we hope that he gets through that physically and also mentally, because I think for a young player to go through a lot of these things physically at the start of their career must be very, very tough.
We will talk more about PSG's big win over Bayern Munich here in a little bit, but first, Lars and I will get into the world of the transfer window. Look where Kyle Walker has landed, and we'll talk about it next here on the KickAround. The good Buzz Carrick will be here at the top of the hour to join Lars and I to chat up about the big U.S.-Mexico game that is happening tomorrow in Houston, the final, the Gold Cup final. And Lars has elected to participate in said conversation. Lars, have you ever once in your entire young millennial life watched a Gold Cup match?
You know, I probably have, because I did go through a phase, partially because I'm nocturnal. I did go through a phase of watching quite a bit of MLS about 10 years ago, thereabouts. And I got quite intrigued by the North American soccer scene. So inevitably, also we've had some interesting players from Costa Rica play in Norway as well. So there's been a link there. So I almost certainly have watched a Gold Cup game. But hand on heart, I cannot say that I recall which one and when.
Little known story, Lars and I's initial meeting of each other occurred because of a Croatian. Was he Croatian? Was Andresnik?
He was Czech.
He was a Czech player who was playing for FC Dallas, who had formerly played for Lars's home team back in Norway, and I had heard Lars mention him on a podcast, and I sent him a note on Twitter. And that's when this wonderful friendship began, is because of the Cobra.
There was a time in my life where the key to my heart was to ask me about obscure footballers who have played in both Norway and MLS. I fear my heart may have hardened.
Yeah,
over the years,
it's
Peter,
golf,
but,
Lars. It's all golf.
Very possible, very possible. But it really was. I mean, and I think, not to get completely sidetracked, but I think it's a good sign for MLS that this doesn't happen quite so often anymore. Because there was a period where I would watch MLS, and there were always like a bunch of dudes who were not very good in the Norwegian league at some point who were turning out in MLS. And I always just thought, well, soccer in America is improving, but maybe, you have a way to go. Now I think there are actually not that many players in the Norwegian league who would be good enough to actually be serious players in the MLS. Great sign for you guys. Well done.
Yes, Olivier. Now we're at Olivier Giroud showing up over here for LA and barely being able to scratch 2 goals before they kick him out of the team. All right, Lars, let's talk a little bit of transfer stuff. Are you and I on the same page that Liverpool is having the most frighteningly good transfer window we've seen from a club in some time?
Well, they've come out early, which I think that's always a strength if you're able to do it. And I think it's an advantage of not being in the Club World Cup. I mean, you miss out on a lot of cash, but at least you can plan your summer normally, and you can send your guys on holiday, and you can kind of bring them together for a normal preseason, and you can get stuff done more easily, I think. And I think they've made a couple of moves that make a lot of sense to me. Florian Wirtz it's a huge signing. They've paid a huge fee for him. He's a German attacking midfielder who and a friend of mine who's a talent scout who's worked for some big clubs in Europe. Him and his sort of his sphere, the scouting community, rate him as one of the top 3 best young players in the world, alongside Lamine Yamal and Jude Bellingham. So that's the tier we're kind of expecting him to be at if he can try and make the transition from the Bundesliga to the Premier League. Liverpool have pounced ahead of Bayern, which is where everyone expected him to end up. He has gone to Liverpool. And also ahead of Man City, by the way, who I suspect, and this is some informed guesswork here, I'm almost certain Man City thought they could or would get Wirtz as their De Bruyne replacement. Yeah. But Liverpool got in there and they got the deal done. And it's you've pointed out to me privately you think it's a big risk because it's a big fee, but I would also just say that my sort of feedback from people who I know who have a proven track record on calling these things say that this guy is very nearly a slam dunk. He is so good, is what I am told by people who are smarter than me.
Is there, and this may be way too early to be talking about this, but obviously the loss of Diego Jota is a huge deal for all the obvious personal reasons, but there is a practical reality of what's happening on the field, and I just wonder, is Wirtz kind of like the obvious person that will end up helping fill that role in some way, some form, or do you think that Slot had another plan for Wirtz that now he's going to have to try to figure out?
So Wirtz is an interesting one in that he can both play as a typical number 10, but you can also use him out wide, and he has played as a false 9. And he has a track record of producing both goals and assists in significant quantities. I mean, he had he's been in double figures for goals and assists in both of his last 2 seasons for Leverkusen. So really, he can do a bit of everything. He's a very, very different player to Diogo Jota, of course, who is a poacher. He came through as a winger, but found his pace at Liverpool as like an opportunistic goal poacher. Really, he's not that at all. And with the news that they are trying to find a home for Darwin Núñez, it's been suggested he might move to Napoli if they can agree on a price. I would suspect that Liverpool would be in the market for a forward this summer, not just because of the tragic passing of Diogo Jota, but also because I think they're about to call time on the Darwin Núñez experience.
You and I have talked offline quite a bit about the interesting aspects of signing Frimpong and Kirkez. And not just as replacements for the obvious older players that they're replacing in Robinson and Trent, but also the reality that it gives Slot an opportunity to really recalculate this team post Mohamed Salah in what he uses those 2 guys for.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're preparing for a possible world without Mo Salah he's there for now. He's reassigned. He's there for at least one more year, possibly two. But at some point, they're going to have to start thinking about what this team looks like without him. I think that's also one of the reasons why they feel going big for Florian Wirtz is the right thing to do, because he's someone who's potentially a franchise player in attack who can take the reins after Salah when he eventually goes at some point. But Frimpong is interesting because he plays on the right side, right? And he's kind of been presented as a fullback. And sure, he's played fullback, but he played wingback pretty much all last year for Leverkusen. And in fact, I've seen him play on the wing for Leverkusen. He's an extremely attack-minded player. Now, Liverpool are used to have a very attack-minded right-back. That's not going to be a change for them. I mean, it's a different kind of attack. I mean, Trent, of course, has an incredible range of passing and incredible vision, something as strange as almost a playmaker at right-back. It's not something we've seen for a while. Frimpong is more of a classic sort of winger who's been retooled into a fullback. He's extremely fast, extremely happy to get forward, and I don't know, man. If you want to play with the idea of maybe playing three at the back or having one player who transitions between midfield and defense, you have a guy there who has the engine to cover most of the flank in terms of the space he covers, and who likes to get forward a lot, at least.
Well, let's not forget also, quite a while ago, they started the process and have completed the signing of Mamardashvili. I've been practicing that. And goal.
Very good.
And that's a nice addition. If you ever get a little iffy about Allison, that's not a bad backup to have in your toolbox.
Yeah, but I will say I'm a little bit surprised by the reports that he is apparently going to be at Liverpool next year, already fighting for the shirt, because he is good. Like, he's one of the better. I'd certainly put him. I like him. I have a personal soft spot for him. I'll declare an interest, but I don't think it's outrageous to say that he is a top 10 goalkeeper in Europe. Certainly European nationalities. So having him at your club, but not being an automatic starter, it's a bit of a luxury. But maybe he backs himself. Maybe he sees a chink in Alisson's armor. But then Alisson is very good as well. I had a feeling when they made the signing that they were going to kind of preparing for the fact that Alisson is going to head to Saudi Arabia at some point, but it hasn't happened yet. Well, they have an extremely good shopstopper, a giant of a man, a heroic and talismanic figure for his national team. Just really good reflexes and good size. Different Alisson, not as good with his feet, I would say, but just a great shotstopper. Almost a slightly old-fashioned goalkeeper coming in Mamardashvili. I have a hard time seeing him on the bench all year, to be honest. I kind of think they should loan him out somewhere if Alisson's still going to be there. But with Kelleher leaving, maybe that's just what they're doing. Maybe they're going to rotate. It'll be interesting to see.
All right. And quickly, on the heels of hearing that UEFA have fined Chelsea 91 million euros for breaching their fair play rules and all of that stuff, we also have seen that they just signed yet another player in Gittins for 51 million euros or 51 million pounds from the German club he came from. They just, a few days ago, signed João Pedro from Brighton. Estevio, the young Brazilian that just scored against them last night in the game that they ended up winning against Fluminense. How is Chelsea able to do this and get away with this, Lars?
So their settlement with UEFA can basically be boiled down to the fact that they've gotten a fine, but they've also gotten a very strict. They've gotten several financial targets they have to meet in the coming seasons before they'll get even more fines from UEFA and possibly even be banned from the tournament. And one of the big things is that they found a few loopholes that they could use to pass the cost control rules in the Premier League, such as selling two hotels to themselves.
And selling UEFA their women's team.
Yes, they sold the women's team also to themselves. I mean, it's incredible stuff. But UEFA have just kind of gone thumbs down on that one. Like, we are not having it. So they've been punished by UEFA. I think if you were in a room with Todd Bowley and the guys who are running it, they would say that, yes, we're spending money, but we're spending overwhelmingly on younger players, and we are expecting them to increase in value. We're expecting them to have a sell-on value. We can get rid of them. They have, I believe they brought down the wage bill. I mean, and this sounds crazy with all the transfers they made, but I'm certain in the last set of accounts, their wage bill was actually lower than it was towards the end under Abramovich, which is also an offshoot of signing younger players. So there is a plan there. They're spending a lot of money, but they're signing young players who can develop, who can grow in value, and they're bringing the wage bill down a little bit. That's the thinking. But you also need to be successful on the pitch for that all to work out. So we'll see. Jamie Gittins is such an interesting case. I know we're pressed for time here a little bit, but I just want to say very quickly, The worrying thing about him is that if you look at how Jadon Sancho has done after moving from Dortmund to England, not well, I guess I think we've all concluded. And Jamie Gittins is nowhere near the level in terms of his impact for the club as Jadon Sancho was. Jadon Sancho was a brilliant player for Dortmund who got a lot of goals and assists. Jamie Gittins is not even an automatic starter, I don't think. I'm not even sure he's in their best 11. But the big difference is what we've seen with Sancho after he came to England is that he just lacks a little bit of speed. He struggles to get away from defenders. He's very technically tidy, but he gets brushed off the ball too quickly. Gittins is a little bit more extreme physically. He accelerates better. He's got a little bit more punch to him physically. He does look like a guy who could thrive in the Premier League. Transfer fee seems a little high for me for a guy who hasn't proven that much just yet, but there's a lot of, as it's often the case with Chelsea signings, they've signed a 20-year-old where there's a lot of good raw materials. We've heard that a lot over the last couple of years. It is time for them to start delivering.
Well, if Chelsea and Todd can get away with it, more power to them. And then the two shockers today. Newcastle lining up to sign Anthony Elanga from Forest for £55 million. Seems like a big deal.
Yeah.
And Kyle Walker. Yes, that Kyle Walker, the guy that proves that baldness has been cured, has signed with Burnley.
Okay, so Kyle Walker to Burnley the level at which it makes sense is that he is from the north of England. He's a northerner, and I think if he wanted to sort of wind down his career a little bit, he had 6 months in Milan, presumably didn't really feel that. There was always a sense that if he was going to wind down, it doesn't surprise me that he's gone to a club in the north of England. I know Burnley isn't exactly right next door from Sheffield, where he's from, but it is in that sort of region. I think that's part of it. And it's an interesting transfer. I also just want to say on the Elanga thing, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm going to show my pop culture knowledge here. And just say, I'm sure you have many listeners around Texas who have watched the popular broadcast show Brooklyn Nine-Nine, in which it is a recurring gag that Terry Crews goes, "Why?" when something foolish happens. And I gotta say, that was exactly, to the extent that I look like Terry Crews, which is not a big extent, that is exactly how I reacted when I saw that story, that Newcastle are looking to spend 50 million plus on Anthony Elanga. Who, God bless him, he's a physical specimen. He runs fast in a straight line. He's uncomplicated off the pitch. I understand he's, but really, that is not a signing that makes a lot of sense to me.
I'm laughing because I love it every time Lars makes a reference to American sitcoms. It always blows me away that you're aware of an Andy Samberg Fox-produced sitcom.
So aware, Peter.
All right, well, there you go. And then we never even got into all of the crazy signings that Pep is doing over at City and what weird chemistry he's trying to put together, but we'll do that in a future episode. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll dive into Lars's favorite new thing in the world, the Club World Cup, next year on the KickAround. We'll have a discussion about the U.S. men's national team, Pochettino, the big game versus Mexico, little round table with our good friend Buzz Carrick here in about 15-20 minutes on the KickAround. Andy will be back next week, but in his stead this week, from the miracle of the internet, from somewhere on the other side of Earth, it is Lars Sivertsen. Once again, Lars, thank you so much for doing this.
Oh, anytime, sir. Having a great time.
I know. It's always fun doing this with you. All right, so you said this earlier in the day, or on the show, that your attitude around the Club World Cup may have changed a little bit in that last half of PSG Bayern Munich.
I would say that my attitude has changed would be strong. I still have my objections to the way this tournament is being hosted, the way it's kind of been plonked into the calendar with no consideration for the player welfare, for really anything. But I will admit that I did enjoy one of the games as it was going on, which has not really been the case earlier in the season. I really struggled with the group stages, Peter. I felt every time I sat down to watch any of the games from this tournament, it has really felt like watching usual preseason tours in the US held by some of these teams, with the exception, of course, of the teams involving the big South American teams who have mobilized an incredible fan base, and where the Brazilian teams have also kind of held their own on the pitch. But too many of these games have been played in half-empty stadia, or at least they've looked half-empty on television, sometimes in high heat. The tempo has been bad. The players have looked only partially interested. There have been a few exceptions, but generally speaking, it hasn't been great. And I've really been trying because there's not a lot else going on. I will say the second half of PSG Bayern Munich felt like a real game. It felt like the players were really invested in what was going on. Given that both teams are really tired after a long season, the tempo was maybe not at peak, but it was good. They were and they were both putting a lot into it, and there was some high quality soccer being played. And aside from the very unfortunate injury, of course, it was an enjoyable spectacle all around.
Yes. Just side note, one of the funny side things happening about this tournament is nobody seems to agree on whether or not all of this counts as the current or last season or for next.
I know.
Season.
On the graphics, you see, like, when people score, it's their so-and-so many goal this season. I was like, I'm not having that. This is not that season. Sorry,
this next
guys.
Season?
It just can't be.
Does this count?
No, it's no season. This is happening in a void.
That's awesome. Yes, and you mentioned the injury, and we did discuss it earlier. Musiala with the awful, and frightful to see ankle snap at the very end of the first half. And I am going to ask you the question because this has been debated quite a bit since then. Should that have been called a penalty and a red card?
I looked very carefully at. Well, it's definitely not a red card because he's not. I mean, I know this sounds absurd when he has that unfortunate injury, but it isn't. It doesn't fulfill the criteria for a red card. He's not flying in recklessly at high speed, carelessly at high speed. I don't think. I was about to say he doesn't fly in dangerously, which is a silly thing to say when the guy ends up breaking a leg. But I mean, he just does what every goalkeeper does in that situation. It's the similar thing to when Son Heung-min unfortunately broke an Everton player's leg, Andre Gomez's leg, a couple of years ago.
That's right.
Like, that was also. You can have these completely innocuous things, but if you hit them at the right, it's a contact sport. Accidents happen. No, I don't think it's anywhere near a red card. I did also wonder about a penalty, and I watched the replay a few times. It does look to me like he gets the ball, the goalkeeper, a fraction before he gets the player, but it's very tight, and it's certainly not a million miles away from a penalty, to be perfectly honest. But it wasn't given, certainly.
Yeah, I do wonder that in the horror of seeing what everybody saw on the screen just like caused everybody to freeze and forget to even consider that it was a foul, potentially a foul would have been a PK.
I do think that's possible, but again, having looked at the replay, it's very tight.
Yeah,
whether it's fractional. So yeah, but just to back up what I was saying about, like, I saw things in this game in terms of effort that I haven't seen, certainly not from the big European teams earlier in the tournament. Like just shortly before PSG scored, actually. In the 70-somethings minute, you have Harry Kane, who is a 31-year-old centre-forward, so he's not old, but he's a guy who's had some injuries, who's been visibly slowing down physically the last couple of years, who's played a lot of games this season. He's clearly not in peak physical condition, was absolutely bursting his lungs on tracking back into his own box almost. He was making a huge recovery run from striker position and put in a brilliant tackle on the left back of PSG. Who had made its way forward on Nuno Mendes. Fantastic tackle. But I'm just saying, in the group stage, no forward from any of the European teams was making that run, and certainly not Harry Kane. So you can see now, maybe, I'm not sure how all these guys feel about this tournament. I suspect they'd rather be on a yacht somewhere, but now they're here. They are competitive guys, and they really do want to win it. And I'm kind of quietly optimistic that we might get some entertaining games in what's left of this tournament now.
Well, they're all competitors, and at the end of the day, there's so much money on the line. It's even a lot for those guys. And
yeah, I suspect some very healthy bonus agreements have been made to get them to turn out for this stuff.
Yeah, so I think you're right. I mean, I do suspect the rest of this will be entertaining one way or the other, and we've got one Brazilian team still in it, and the rest of them are the big guys we normally see. The Real Madrid Dortmund game happens at 3:00 today. And by the way, for that game, like this morning, you don't have to have the app, the DAZN app. But here in the United States, they have licensed it to Turner, so the game is on regular TNT television, not just the DAZN app. If you're tired of that beating and user interface, you can just dial up your local provider.
Yeah, it would be lovely to watch it without quite so many ads for Saudi Arabia all the time. But actually, the game in question has actually kicked off. It's just gone 3. It started now.
That's
so
right.
If you
it
want
is 3.
You can
Sorry.
put it. So what you should do, you should put it on, mute it, and listen to the rest of the KickAround, but just have the game on in the background.
You should. You absolutely should. I totally lost track of time. The game is kicked off. Very good.
I have that effect on people, Peter.
So PSG will play the winner of that game, and Fluminense and Chelsea play each other on the 8th of July. So that should be an interesting game as well. Overall, Club World Cup, Lars, your distaste of it is multi-layered, but is there anything that, other than this particular game, that you've taken away from it that you're like, okay, I wasn't expecting that, or a particular player that has showed up, kind of like in international World Cups where we get to see players that maybe we haven't gotten to see before that really surprise us, that kind of story?
Well, I'm really glad that we've seen, especially the Brazilian teams, hold up as well as they have. Because if this had been just a complete whitewash and the European teams beating everyone, it wouldn't have been any fun, right? They would have been completely pointless. And that isn't what's happened. And we can discuss the reasons. I think there's been I do think okay, let me just say this. The great British South American football correspondent, Tim Vickery, who knows more about this stuff than I do, certainly, says that actually the Brazilian teams, they've been timing their whole fitness regime and everything to peak during this. Like, this is their big thing. They've been rotating players in the league to keep them fresh for the Club World Cup.
Yeah.
Now, let me say, I don't think any of the European teams were doing that. I don't think towards the end of the season, PSG were not resting people to make sure they were ready for the Club World Cup. So there's a slightly different in how seriously they're taking it. But at least they've turned up and they've really, they've given a good account of themselves. Their fans have been fabulous. So from that point of view, in terms of showing that it is worthwhile having a global club tournament, I see you see little signs of something going on here. And as I said, I don't hate the idea of there being a Club World Cup. I think it makes total sense. We have this concept in soccer of the pyramid. You know, if you play in a local beer league at the weekend, it's a very local league, and if the teams that are slightly better, they play regionally. The teams that are very good play nationally, and if you do that, then you qualify for the CONCACAF Champions League and you play in the Confederation. It makes total sense to me that there should be a global thing on top of that. I just have an issue with the arrogance that FIFA have displayed in the way they've put this together, the way they haven't really consulted with any of them. They've not consulted with the players' union. They don't really properly consulted with the clubs or anyone. They plonked it in America on top of the Gold Cup, which is a thing that's happening in a way that I just think it just shows total disregard to the things that exist already. And last year, you got to remember, last year looked like this wasn't going to happen. Last year, Carlo Ancelotti, the then manager of Real Madrid, said on record that they weren't going to go because they weren't being paid enough money to go. So in their hour of need, FIFA turned, as they so often do, to Saudi Arabia, who indirectly, through buying a stake in DAZN, ended up funding this whole thing. And it's just it's done with a lack of understanding and Fingerspitzgefühl, which is a German phrase for like having a feel for things, that I think it's a brashness. Like, talk to everyone and say, hey, what can we do to make this work for everyone? How can we take away a couple of international dates in the calendar? Can we plan this properly so that teams can make sure their players are fresh for this? Don't just put it in the calendar and throw money at people until they agree to turn up. Like, that's not the way to do things.
Yeah, but you got to watch the Seattle Sounders play PSG.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. But the thing is, you say that flippantly, but I don't hate the idea of.
Well, of course not.
I don't hate the idea. I just think it's been done in a terrible way. And the packaging around, of course, maybe it's aimed at people who are younger than me. It's possible, but it's been quite influencer heavy, and it's been quite. It really does. I'm sorry to bring this on. It really does remind me of Live Golf, which just in the sense of there's a fakeness to it, and that doesn't mean it can't give you individual moments that are exciting and that it has characters involved that you're interested in. But there's a veneer, there's a sort of air of fakeness around the whole thing that I don't enjoy so far. But I'm trying to keep an open mind. I know it doesn't sound like it. Well, but I've been watching a lot of the games, and some of them have been okay, and this one today was quite good.
All right. Well, I love your passion for all of that. It is great. We should note that part of the PSG Bayern Munich story is in the last 10 minutes of the game, PSG suffered not one but two red cards. Somehow still scored the second goal after being down two men, and that probably Hernandez and Pacho both being out for the semifinal against whoever they end up playing may end up being a side story everybody should keep note of, moving forward, right?
Yeah, we massively buried the lead. We didn't actually talk about the game, just about the fact that I enjoyed it, which, I mean, I'm probably not the story here. But, I mean, it was pretty even in the first half. And Bayern were not bad, but PSG, they have so much speed. It's incredible. We've talked about this a lot this season. I can't remember a team that has so much speed in the 11 that PSG do have. And that just means that you're never safe. They can always hurt you, even when they go down to 9 men.
Well, the other thing that happened since we last did a kick-around was Man City got kicked out by Al Hilal, and that was the 4-3 game. That that is the kind of stereotypical upset that we love in these kind of tournaments. And I heard a lot of people say that people thought that Infantino would be loving the fact that a Middle Eastern Arab team was, moving on into the tournament. And I remember when it became very clear that they had won the game, the camera took a shot of Infantino in the stands, and he looked mortified that City was out of this. And I'm curious as if you think it's good or bad for the tournament that City is out and Al Hilal moved on.
I think. Well, I don't know what he looked like at the time. I missed that shot, but I think Infantino is delighted that his Saudi friends have a team representing,
even at the expense of the
world,
even with the expense of City.
Yes,
really?
I think City are. Yes, City are a dominant team in England, but they're not that big of a commercial draw. I don't think. I think as long as Real Madrid are still there, PSG are still there. I think that's absolutely fine. And I think that the relationship between FIFA and Saudi Arabia can be best described as cozy right now, and I think he's quite happy to have them through. And that let's be fair to Al Hilal. That was a very competent performance.
Yes.
It was a very competent performance by them. They've brought a lot of players in from big European leagues, and they brought now Simone Inzaghi, who's a great coach to coach them, and they were rugged and they hit City on the counter. City, I think, are still kind of finding their way under with Guardiola and a few of the new players coming in. Not sure I liked Thierry Reinders as the deep lying midfielder. Not sure that's going to keep happening. But the City still finding their feet, and Al Hilal were really well coached, very direct, aggressive, compact. Good things.
And the
sure.
quiet sub story there is Rodri going out with a reoccurrence of that same injury, apparently, and whether or not that's a long-term or short-term thing I don't think they've talked about openly yet.
Yeah, no, we'll have to see. I mean, I did see some commentary suggesting, that this was City with their best 11. I said, my friend, I really don't think we're going to see Thierry Reinders at the 6 and Gundogan in too many of City's, best 11s this season. But still, they should beat a team from Saudi Arabia, with all due respect, and they didn't. So hats off to Saudi Arabia for that achievement.
All right, Lars, I'm glad you enjoyed at least 45 minutes of Club World Cup earlier today. We'll take a break. When we come back, the good Buzz Carrick joins us, and we get all in and up into the U.S. men's national team and the big game against Mexico next on the Kick-Around. For those of you out there listening on your radio who are living in a season-long state of depression over the current form of one Dallas burn, we'll hold a little, which feels like we do this way too much lately, a little FC Dallas group therapy here a little bit later in the show with the good Buzz Carrick, who, by the way, joins us in studio now, my old friend Buzz. Thank you for joining us, Buzz.
Thanks for having me on, Peter.
And electing to stick around and participate in said conversation about the U.S. men's national team is our friend Lars Sivertsen. Hello again, Lars. Thank you for doing this.
Of course. Hello.
Lars, we've talked a lot about the national team and our excitement over having somebody of the stature of Mauricio Pochettino as the manager. And I'm curious, how does that, like, when you found out the U.S. was signing him to be the manager of this country's national team, what was your reaction to that? I don't think you and I have ever actually talked about this.
My first thing was that it seemed like an interesting little sort of holding job for him, taking this on a short-term basis. And I think just the idea of managing the US in a home World Cup is really cool, right? I mean, I have a feeling if the next World Cup was in Uzbekistan, I'm not quite as sure he would have taken the job, to be perfectly honest. I think that is one of those things that, like, it's quite attractive. And I think it's one of the reasons you see quite a few big-name managers go into national team management right now, because that's such a big sort of box office showy thing to do. On the sporting side of things, I wonder about Pochettino at this point. And I, as a Spurs fan, I have so much love and admiration for the job he did there. But I remember I saw an interview with him, I think probably even when he was still at PSG, or maybe after that, when he said that I'm different now than when I was at Tottenham. I'm more mature and calm. And I just think back to those days. I think I'm not sure I want my Pochettino to be mature and calm. I think the thing that made him incredible at Tottenham was that he had a lot of passion, and he just kind of took a young team and just made them absolutely run through walls for him and convinced them that if they just do what he tells and runs and works as hard as he says, then things will be fine. I want him to be full of fire and fury, and I'm not sure a mature Pochettino is quite as good a Pochettino, is what I thought at the time. And I'm curious about how those observations tally up with what you've seen so far with him in charge of the US.
Well, I think, like everybody, I was excited about him coming, but I was also curious as to what he was going to do with this team tactically, or different from Berhalter, and how he would position this team. And as the time has gone by, I've said on this, I've talked about it on other podcasts, that my growing kind of concern is how he sets this team up, and this team's inability to be more focused on possessing the ball versus creating opportunities. And yet here we are. They're in a Gold Cup final, undefeated. They've won 5 games, and he's doing it with what is ostensibly a C team. And Buzz, you're here. I'm curious. You're kind of one of my tactical friends. You know these players. You're familiar with all the players on the team. I'm curious, do you think Pochettino's doing a good job so far?
I do. Most people may not be aware I think where the Gold Cup ranks in terms of the hierarchy of coaches. So most of the U.S. coaches look at it as a thing to help them for whatever is next. Clearly, he's coaching this tournament with the World Cup in mind, in the sense of resting players, and then he's looking at the pool the next tier down, like who can move into my squad, who can help me going forward. And I think you have to play tactics that are going to work against a higher level of competition than you're going to find in the Gold Cup. It's very clear that most of the time you have to play different tactics in the World Cup than you do in CONCACAF qualifying, for example, but we don't have that. So like he's having to use the Gold Cup in lieu of his CONCACAF qualifying to sort of blood his team, test young guys, and test out tactics. And so I think the tactics are designed to work against teams that are better than you tactically, which you're not facing in the Gold Cup until maybe this next one.
Lars, I was trying to make a comparison back to when Pochettino was having such a successful run at Spurs, because I remember my perception and memory of his time at Spurs is made up of 2 things. One is that he had an impressive amount of success with a very young group of players. And the second one is that as often when a manager gets into his term, people get frustrated with the lack of results or a style of play. And I'm wondering if you can help me, if I'm correct in those perceptions and memories, and I'm trying to see if any of it mirrors some of the things that I feel like we're seeing here with him with the U.S. team.
I don't think that there wasn't that Spurs of frustration with the style of play, really. I mean, it was high tempo, it was aggressive. I think maybe Tottenham have more of a history of having mavericks in the team, whereas Pochettino had a big emphasis on physicality. Their best season, I would argue, or certainly the season they finished second, 2016, 2017. A lot of that season they played with like Eric Dyer and Victor Wanyama as the midfield too. Like they had they had a central defender and a really hardworking guy next to him, just destroying all of your attempts at attacking, and then they would hit pretty quickly and attack pretty quickly. But I think also a lot of this is conditioned by the players you have available. And I think it was more about vibes with him, really, than any great tactics, which is why I've always wondered, where do we put him in the pantheon of great managers? But I was kind of hoping, for the US's sake, is that you have a fair number of young players in the group. And I was kind of hoping he would build that kind of culture that he managed to do at Tottenham. That's the thing he was the most successful at. Build a culture of hard work, of sacrifice, of dedication. And that was kind of what I could imagine him maybe doing. And that is such an interesting thing in the context of what's been going on this summer with maybe his frustration at players who are maybe one player in particular who's not made himself available.
Well, that certainly was kind of the headline running into the tournament. And I will say that where we sit today, them playing in a final against Mexico tomorrow, which is obviously, if you had told us this is what the outcome was going to be at the beginning of the tournament, we would all have a different opinion. But going into the tournament, there was a lot of angst and concern that this was going to be a deal where they were like getting knocked out in the group stage or at the first knockout game, and it hasn't turned out that way. And one of the things that I get the sense, like the network that's covering the tournament here in the States is very much wanting to drive this narrative and this idea that Pochettino has successfully turned this kind of ragtag bunch of American C-level players into a real team that is going to give Mexico a fight tomorrow. I don't know if that's true or not, Lars. Mexico's playing a better squad than the U.S. is. But it's U.S.-Mexico, and, as they say, you throw the records out the window. Buzz, I'm curious, what has been your – is there something about what you've seen so far out of the team that has, you've enjoyed the most? Or maybe something about it that you've found concerning?
Well, what I enjoyed the most is Diego Luna.
Yes,
of course, Moon Man. So I guess we're shifting to Moon Man instead of Moon Boy.
Is he not Moon Boy anymore?
Well, he was, but then Lals called him Moon Man. I thought, well, he's 20 something with 3 kids or whatever, so I'm happy to shift to Moon Man. He plays with a certain je ne sais quoi, if you will, a certain something that other people don't have, and he reminds me, of course, is in some ways of the guy that you run into down on the Sunday League that drinks a bunch of beers by halftime and still dribbles through everybody and scores goals. Diego Luna's got this wider, stockier, Gascoigne-esque physique, but has the same Gascoigne-esque mentality, the Clint Dempsey mentality, and that's something that we were critical of a lot of our quote-unquote European stars for lacking. Well, he brings that, and that fire is what it personifies for me historically successful U.S. national teams. On the other side of the coin, I watch Tim Ream play, who still is a very quality player, but it makes me very, very nervous that it's his age, that he's still the only answer other than Chris Richards, who had an excellent tournament. Those two guys still look like they're the only choice at center back, and that worries me going a year out from a World Cup with a guy who's 47. He's not 47, I know. But you know what I mean? With Tim Ream. So that's a concern. I think this is a C team, and one more positive for me takeaway is that with our BC team now, MLS and European players collectively have matured enough that we now don't worry about anything but Mexico in CONCACAF. Like all these other teams now, when you're looking at them on the sheet, you're looking at the lineups, you're getting ready for the game, you're like, this is a game they should walk over. There's nobody that challenges them. Even like maybe if you'd run into Panama, like a peak full Panama, maybe they do. But you saw how they played against Trinidad. You saw how they played against Haiti, against Costa Rica. None of these games really seemed in doubt. Costa Rica sort of needed I felt a little bit of a luck to tie that game out, or maybe a late letdown by the U.S., whichever one you want to call it. So, the world has changed again in terms of soccer as we move forward, I think.
Lars,
I want to just shoot in because this is very much, I think, what Pochettino does best. It's interesting hearing you talking about Luna, is that having a guy who doesn't have a huge name yet, probably feels he might have a point to prove, and getting a lot of performances out of someone like that is typical Pochettino. Before he was at Tottenham, he was at Southampton, and again, they had a pretty young crop of players. And I'm reliably informed, he spoke almost no English at the time. I'm reliably informed that one of the first phrases he learned in English, which I absolutely cannot repeat on the radio, but it was bleeping push up, you bleeps. It was one of the first, because he wanted to get them higher up the field. But just knowing this crop of players, as you do, Buzz, do you think there is the players there and the profiles there to create this kind of physical, hard-running, passionate group? Because I swear to God, that is what Pochettino wants to work with.
I would say so. You have to remember that there's a whole group of players that are not currently in this mix. This is not by any means a finished product. And you can look at some of the guys that I think came through this cup and showed well that have some of these capabilities. Like Tillman for me has had a really great cup.
Boy,
that guy can play lots of minutes if you need him to and really run and really move. Chris Richards has shown a next level. He covers just immense amounts of grounds. He's the oldest of them at 25. Tillman 23, Luna 21. I thought Sebastian Berhalter, of all people, had a really great cup. Now he's not a guy you think's going to start. But if he can add as a nice depth piece at 24, certainly is a guy that understands the game at a really high level and has a really good motor. He's not fast, but it's a good motor. And outside of that, it's the people that are going to make a difference for this team are the ones that aren't here, other than perhaps Tyler Adams, who clearly was using this as a fitness builder, getting back from his injury. So when you include a Robinson who can run the whole field, Fulham Robinson, excuse me. When you include a Sergio Dest who can run the whole field, when you have Tyler Adams healthy who can run the whole field, Weston McKennie who can run the whole field until he falls over but still does it. There's plenty of engine in this field and some of the talented but not the Pulisic or not the Gio Reyna, but outside of maybe those guys, there's plenty of ability to really work hard.
Buzz, where do you sit on the Aubameyang bandwagon?
To me, he's a player that has a lot of raw tools that many mid-level European clubs would be interested in because they don't have those kind of athletes, that size and that strength and that power. But there's a rawness. The ball is too loose. Like, he's a guy that, for me, historically would help you in CONCACAF qualifying. Fine, but the minute you get to the World Cup, he's not going to help you because the space will drop even further. The time before you get hit drops even further. That ball bouncing away a half a foot is going to kill you when you get to a World Cup level of game. So, a squad piece that would help you get to the World Cup, but for me is not a guy you actually take to the World Cup.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll get to see what his real qualities are because Charlotte has cut a deal apparently with, I think, Derby County, like $8 million or something. I think he's going to go play in the championship next year. I think. Is it Derby? I think it is. I don't know.
I don't remember who it is, but, a lot of the questions with somebody like that will also depend on the health of the rest of the pool.
Sure.
Because is he better than Haji Wright? Is he better than? I don't think he's better than Pepe. But Pepe Blue has got a leg falling off right now. So how does Sargent fit into these things? It's not always just a question of how good is this one particular guy. It's what does he have that somebody else doesn't have, and how healthy are the other options. So.
Lars, is somebody from a small nation like Norway, which has one of the best midfielders and one of the best strikers in the world, and yet struggle as a nation in the footballing stage. How does listening to us talk about the U.S. men's national team, is that a weird conversation for you to be a part of?
No. Not at all. It's very different, right? Because we just accept we're small nations. We're going to have some good generations and some not so good ones. I mean, we're lucky now with Holland and Odegaard. I remember about 10 years ago, there was a period where Josh King was our best player and our biggest star. And I was like, those were not great times with all due respect to Josh King. So these things go up and down. I guess for you guys, because you're competing with other sports, you have a giant talent pool, but you just kind of have to hope some of the good kids turn to soccer. I just also it's so fascinating to me. And I don't want to I'm sure this has been a talking point, but when Pochettino was at Tottenham, he struggled initially because they'd spent a lot of money post selling Gareth Bale, and they'd brought in a few guys who were biggish names or certainly thought they were very good, who were not performing. And he was initially brought in with part of a remit is to get something out of these guys we bought, and he couldn't do it. It didn't work in the beginning, and he decided, okay, if I'm going to get fired here, I'm going to get fired my way. And he brought in kids. He brought in kids from the reserves. He brought in Ryan Mason and Nabil Bentaleb and guys that were not super talented, but who would run all day if given the chance in the first team. And it's kind of hard for me not to kind of see slight parallels perhaps in the future here between some of the squad selection decisions that he's going to have to make going into the World Cup.
Yeah, we've run long, but I will say, if you compare the body language of Pochettino during the Gold Cup versus the body language during the Nations League tournament recently, where Pulisic waved off a substitution, I think my prediction for the World Cup next year is there is going to be a lot of surprises when he announces his roster, and there's going to be a lot of debate about it. Just put a pin in that one. I don't think that story's over yet. Lars, thank you for taking time from your evening over there on the other side of the earth to help out with the Kick-Around today.
Lars.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been delightful. Still a terrifying bit of audio.
It's his own
So
song.
scary.
He has his own song.
I don't have a song.
Well, we'll have to pull it. Lars, thanks so much, my friend. Everybody go find Lars on the internet and his podcast, The Lars Resort, wherever you find podcasts. Have a great evening, Lars.
Thank
Thanks,
you
bud.
very much.
All right.
Bye, guys. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you so much. When we come back, I am going to pose to Buzz the following question. What does Dallas Till I Die mean to you? Next on the KickAround. I have tickets for the 12th. Just want everybody to know that. You know, for somebody that's spent way too much time and money and effort building out a little movie-watching place in my house, I still love to go to the theaters, and I've already been to see F1, and I saw the Jurassic Park movie last night. They're summer popcorn movies. They are what they are. Get over it. They're fun. And I have big hopes for Superman, I think. I have big hopes for that. Welcome back to the KickAround. Thank you again to Lars, who helped fill in. Andy comes back next week. For the rest of the show, though, it is me and my very old soccer talking friend, Buzz Carrick, who you may or probably do know is the guy that is the finest independent journalist of all things Dallas soccer, specifically the Dallas Burn / FC Dallas. And it's interesting times around here, Buzz. By the way, thanks for coming into the studio.
You're welcome.
It's interesting times because this week in the mail, I received my Atletico Dallas Crude Black, I think they call it. Is that the color name, Crude Black?
Yeah.
Yeah, Crude Black jersey. Now they've released a topaz blue and a black commemorative jersey.
Yes.
These won't be the jerseys I suspect they wear when they kick off in a few years.
You don't need to suspect. It for sure is not the jersey they'll be wearing.
All right. But everything about the shirt, the packaging, everything was really, really nice. The badge, the Snake and Wolf, that's my new nickname for them, Snake and Wolf, by the way.
Yeah.
Is really well done. All the little details in the shirt. The shirt overall is just very, very nice. And the packaging was all bespoke and everything. And I been watching them over the course of it's been 2 months since they kind of officially announced their branding or so.
Sure.
And I've just been watching them do a couple of things that I thought was weird and a little curious, but really start to put things together over the last month or so. So much so that I'm really finding myself admiring their efforts to make watching soccer at the Cotton Bowl cool again.
Yeah.
Because that's where you and I met 30 years ago with the Dallas Burn back in 96, 97, somewhere in there. We used to love to go watch soccer at the Cotton Bowl, and that's where Atletico's going to play. Dallas Trinity plays there now. And in all of this discourse with all of this, it dawned on me about allegiances because I'm a Dallas Burn, FC Dallas. I consider that to be my team.
Mm-hmm.
But if another team like Atletico comes to town, and they're not even playing in the same league, whether it's the equal tier or a tier below, is there a reason not to be able to support both of those things? And my question to you is the famous phrase, Dallas Till I Die, TDID. What does that mean to you?
Well, it turns out that it means like the area. It means DFW, because we've talked about this many times. Growing up, there was nothing, you and I grew up, there was nothing but the sidekicks. So we were a wasteland, right? And we all liked the sidekicks.
There was Tornado for a short run.
Tornado when I was 12, sure. Yeah. And then FC Dallas for 28 seasons has been the only thing. So to me, that was it. That was the soccer team. That's who I paid attention to. That's who I started writing and blogging about. And that's who I had an emotional attachment to. But now there's other teams coming. And I'm finding increasingly that I just really love high-level soccer in my local market. And I'm finding that I have as much affinity for Dallas Trinity and Atletico Dallas as I do FC Dallas. I imagine when the Fort Worth team comes in and the Fort Worth women's team comes in, which are the next two, we'll probably have strong feelings about those two teams as well. Now, what will happen probably is, and this is the way it was with most fans, until they start playing each other, and then you'll find you'll have an emotional reaction. But I was also thinking about the nature of soccer, and I was trying to think about pro sports in this country in general. It's very rare to have an instance of two pro teams in the same town. So maybe like Giants and Jets fans could tell you, but like most of us only have one team. And so I was only thinking like, well, where is it that you get this real hatred, in air quotes, of the other team? And to me, it's like high school sports. But above that, in terms of your own market, like we all hate the other college, but that's not in our own little market. Right. So in our backyard, I don't know how we'll respond. I don't know how every individual person will respond. But for me, it's about the growth of soccer in general. And I want there to be a big, huge, thriving soccer market and audience. And I want all of these teams to be successful. So I don't find that I have a rooting interest, at least to this point, in any one of them over the other.
So it is okay to be Dallas till I die and decide you want to be an Atletico supporter.
Yeah. Well, I think it's okay to become a fan of a team for whatever reason you want to become a fan of that team. I will make fun of someone that's a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs when they're from Frisco, Texas. The Stars are right down the road.
Maybe Auntie lives in Toronto.
Yeah, there can be legitimate reasons for you to have your fandom. Fandom's fandom. Now,
Sure.
Specifically in this case, we have for a long, long time discussed certain segments of the market, both geographically and in other ways, that FC Dallas has left behind. And some of those things Atletico Dallas is picking up. And I already hear from people that, like, you know what? Forget FC Dallas. They've treated my group, my segment, my section, my area poorly. I'm going with the new guys that are going to be in my backyard and that are tailoring themselves to me already. So I think there'll be people that will instantly gravitate to one or the other. I'm not that person. I'm the person that will like all of them. Mm-hmm. But I can totally understand somebody who changed. When there was only one thing, you pick the one thing. But when there are options, it's okay to pick whatever the other option is, in my opinion.
Yeah, options are going to be interesting because we assume that the Dallas or Atletico Dallas and the Fort Worth, whatever they're going to be,
name unknown,
will start in the USL Championship in 27, which is the second tier.
Yeah,
and what I do wonder is. Is the local sports fan or soccer fan interested in numbers enough to support both of those things? And how does that impact, if at all, the Major League Soccer team that's been here for 30 years? I mean, that's part of this whole story is that FC Dallas, whatever, has been here for 30 years. There are entire generations of kids that have grown up with that as the same way I grew up with the Dallas Cowboys or you with the Texas Rangers or whatever. It's just part of their sports reality.
Yeah.
And now there's going to be these new options that may or may not be closer to them. I mean, there's a lot of people that live in Collin County that don't want to drive to downtown Dallas or out to down to downtown Fort Worth.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, too, is that as much as FC Dallas has been here for 30 years, how relevant is that brand actually in the market? Like we run into people all the time that if you're wearing an FC Dallas piece of gear, they say, "Oh, what team does your kid play for?" They don't know. Right. I mean, I've literally been on the field outside Toyota Stadium and someone not know the professional team plays inside Toyota Stadium. Someone whose kid plays for FC Dallas, in fact. So like, yeah. So like, let alone like on a larger radar of like the major sports markets in this town or this radio station, no offense. Right. So
sure.
like, yeah. So like, it's not, I don't think it's totally inconceivable that someone might think, oh, there's a team coming. I like their colors better. I like where the stadium is better. Whatever it is you like better, that's fine. Like, it's not like the Cowboys that are so deeply ingrained into the city and the fabric of everything. FC Dallas is an afterthought for a lot of people, even soccer people who their favorite team is actually Liverpool, Andy Swift.
Right.
Or Manchester United, and you think that FC Dallas is your favorite local team, but if you're picking, you're picking Manchester United, I would assume in your case.
No, I would stick to I always say that Dallas is my team.
Okay.
100%. I mean, being there the night they won the Open Cup in 97, all of that is just part of my sports experience.
Yeah.
I love Manchester United, but I adopted that club. FC Dallas or the Burn was just, they were mine. I have ownership in that.
I bet that makes you relatively rare among soccer fans. I bet
Probably.
you that FC Dallas would be second fiddle to the larger percentage of Dallas soccer fans.
That's probably why I care about it so much. That's why I tend to probably talk about it more than anybody wants me to. And why you and I continue to do your podcast despite the fact that they're having an awful season, which...
rough.
Perfect segue, my friend Buzz. We will take a break, and when we come back, we will get into having a little bit of FC Dallas group therapy. Buzz Carrick is here, and we'll do it next year on the KickAround. All right, we have made it to yet another final segment of another episode of the KickAround. Yes, Andy returns next week in all his glory, regale us with stories of Gold Cup fun, or maybe not. Maybe he's not allowed to tell us, but it would be great to have Andy back. In the studio for the final segment, once again, from thirddegree.net is my good friend and your soccer, the original soccer influencer, really. It is Buzz Carrick. Thanks again, Buzz.
You're welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
You know, one of the things that does excite me in this conversation we were having in the last segment is this idea, and I've said this on previous episodes and et cetera, is this idea of having a team in Fort Worth and a team in Dallas playing in the same league against each other, and that derby thing happening again. Like we used to have back when you and I were young adults with the Dallas Freeze and the Fort Worth Fire, the old hockey, minor league hockey back in the day. The idea of having two teams like that at a high level, I think could be really fun.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason why I think it's interesting is that the looking towards the future with that happening is the reality that here we are in 2025. FC Dallas is celebrating, or the whole league is celebrating its 30th anniversary this year. The team is about to introduce a new Dallas Burn throwback retro third jersey, and they're going to debut it for the July what game?
They're going to put it out to the world officially on the 16th, and then the first game they're going to wear it is the 19th, which is 90s night, and they're bringing back a bunch of Burn star players. Yeah.
Yes, I think Andy may get involved in that. Hopefully that game's at night, so they're not wearing black jerseys in the sun. Anyway, but the reason why I think this is an interesting conversation now is the fact that, you know, the team has obviously struggled since its kind of peak season in 2016 when Oscar Pereira, you know, won the double and was like this close to winning the very first American treble of any soccer team ever, and just Amaro Diaz Achilles injury away from doing that. And it's really all just kind of fallen apart since then. Here we are 9 years later. They're in their third coach, their third rebuild, or whatever you want to call it. And then this season in particular is just maddening. They lost again last night on July 4th, a game they always win.
Yeah.
They always win July 4th, and they lose last night at home. This was a 3-game homestand. They lost all 3 games. They are 1 win, 7 losses, and 2 draws at home this entire season, and that is ridiculous to think about.
Yeah, they're currently on a 7-game non-winning streak at home. That's a record for the franchise. The worst stretch of home that they've had in ever. And it's particularly maddening because they're 4-2-4 on the road, which is only 2 losses on the road. Like, you have 8 positive results on the road. That's crazy compared to how absolutely horrible they are at home. And it's no longer like a couple of games sample. This is a massive sample of games for this to be true. It's the most bonkers thing I've ever seen.
And I think the thing that you and I agree upon is obviously having an MLS rookie head coach in Eric Quill, somebody that you and I generally like and thinks has a great future, mixed with a front office who just has yet to prove that they're any good at roster building.
Right.
Has been a kind of a predictable disaster for this season. So I guess the question is, where are the things you look at to think that this can get better, or this is going to be something that's going to take maybe the entirety of the reconstruction project into 2028, or is this something that you feel like they can turn the boat around quickly?
I don't think they can turn it around quickly. Now, an actual true rebuild is relatively rare in Major League Soccer because you can usually just reload a good portion of your roster pretty directly. But FC Dallas had a lot of salary cap issues last year that they had to get out of. They don't have as many DP players as everybody else does, and they still have a few overinflated contracts that are going out to people that are quite old or are hurt. So it's not as simple necessarily for this team to rebuild as it is for some other teams who are. Everyone always says, why can't they do what Miami did? Well, Miami spent 3 seasons preparing themselves for Messi and were able to just basically get rid of everything and set it up to have Messi happen. Dallas has not been doing that. They've been trying to win this whole time. So there's one of the major disconnects is with the idea that they say you have to make the playoffs every year. That's the minimum requirement. Well, it's possible.
You mean the Hunts?
The front office, the Hunts and
yeah.
Zanata have said that. Under Zanata, their TD. So perhaps there's a disconnect between that idea and an actual rebuild where you might go young and might have to build up and develop and try and get better over time. Those things are not necessarily, because if you have to win now, then you're playing older players, mature players who will grind out points. Well, if you're trying to win 3 years from now, maybe you're playing more Nolan Norris, for example, guys that are 20. And so 3 years from now, they'll be 23, 24, and they'll be peaking. Getting closer to their peak. So maybe those two things are disconnected. The other problem is for Quill, stylistically, is a different kind of coach than Nico Estevez was, and who's a different kind of coach than Luchi Gonzalez was. They all had different styles. So the rosters have been built for those coaches and aren't built for the way Eric wants to play. So he has a lot of leftover pieces. And despite the fact, as our friend Dan Crook says, they actually had 3 or 4 really nice moves this last window that put them towards the direction that we think they need to do to grow, to be better. But that doesn't mean that your whole team is now set up, because game after game after game, we watch them play this really weird hybrid formation. And part of the most of the reason for that hybrid formation is the player they bought right before the season when Lucho Acosta fell into their laps. And the problem is that's a very, very expensive player, and he needs a very, very specific system that they don't have the players for.
All right, so let's just as kind of high level as possible.
Yeah.
How do you add a former the guy that was the league MVP just 2 seasons ago, and in many ways be worse than you were last season?
Well, it has to do with the tactics, where like he plays a very specific way that doesn't fit the rest of the roster that the team has. And the best analogies would be to, like, is he a run and shoot quarterback when,
right.
like, and you're going to run the ball 45 times a game. Like that's the kind of disconnect. He doesn't match the play.
But whose fault is that? Is that the front office's fault, or is that Quill's fault for not being flexible enough to, like, figure out how to make your best player flourish?
Well, it might be both, because I'm sure Quill had input into the idea of, like, hey, do you want Lucho Acosta? Sure. He is last year's league MVP, right? So, like, who wouldn't want that player? And the front office thought, what a great player, we're going to add him. But then once you get him into camp, you realize, well, he doesn't play any defense. So, okay, now where can I play him on the field based on – because they spent the first half of the season, Quill did, experimenting with shapes and formations and tactics until he found the one that worked the best with Lucho Acosta. That still doesn't mean he has a roster that's ideally fit. There are portions of it that need to be rebuilt. Center back, most of the defense. There's no backup right back. Both of their 1-6 is 32 and slowest player in the league. The other one is 19 and has no idea how to play 6. So there's definitely lots of problems all throughout the roster. One of which, of course, is unfortunately our good friend Paxton Pomykal, who's getting paid $1 million a year and hasn't played and can't play and probably won't play.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's been a problem for the team, because in the beginning of 22, when this same front office made a lot of really interesting moves and purchases, Paul Arriola, Sebastian Lletget, like in-league moves that really elevated the quality of this team. Jesus Ferreira was still here at this time, and Nico Estevez's first season with those guys really felt really good. And then there was a series of injuries, and things just kind of wussed out from there, and it's not it's never recovered from that point. And so with all the roster things going on, part of me feels like this one is dead and done for the season, but there is a transfer window coming up. And I think if everybody's willing to be just withhold judgment just a little bit, because it's not like this league is so far apart that they're out of the playoffs. They could still easily make playoffs. Waiting to see what they actually do in this particular window, I think, might be important.
Yeah, well, real quick on Nico Estevez, that first season, they had this remarkably injury-free. I mean, it was flawless. They had everybody, the whole squad, healthy all the time, all these great players, and they were great. But that never happens other than this one season.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare. Can't count on that. To bring you to this season, I would say this window, but also the next one. Because this window, he's going to maybe be able to bring in 2 or 3 at most, probably, because it's mid-season MLS, even though it's the big season for everybody else. So how much are you going to really be able to change the team for the back half of the season, which is like 13 games, maybe 14 games will be left, maybe even 12 by the time he gets through the window and actually gets these players in, and then they're going to need time to get acclimatized. Whereas when you also include next winter, when you're going to have a whole bunch of contracts you can get rid of, and now you're talking about bringing in 10 or so more players, and we're going to have a whole spring camp to work. So first part of next season, the rope is going to get really, really short, right? The leash is going to get short because right now, you're right, the season's pretty much in the can, in terms of like really doing something. He can only change it a little bit in the next window. But the one after that, huge changes, and then it's going to be
sure.
What are we doing?
But shouldn't they consider this upcoming window important for not necessarily this season, but next season and the future?
Of course.
So if they can go out and make a big purchase, whether or not, because so infrequently in the history of this league does somebody get signed by any club that suddenly changes the fortune of that club for the second half of that particular season.
Yeah, they've already opened up, by my count, 3 spots on the roster, a couple international spots. They're about to sell Leo Chu. That'll be another spot, not international, but another spot. They have the ability, especially once they sell Chu, and this is maybe too minutia, to switch to the 3 DP model. So you could, if you wanted, get another big, huge star player rather than a kid, if you wanted.
Right.
So that's a really huge decision, and we'll have to see which direction they're going to go. So they could add a DP this summer if they wanted to, and that would be hopefully very impactful. I also think that they have a massive decision to make. Yes, on paper, everybody was on board with Lucio Acosta. At some point, you have to analyze, is it the wrong guy? Did we make a mistake? Can he just not work with what Eric Quill wants to do? And maybe a decision has to be made one way or the other with one guy or the other. And you maybe have to admit that like it was the wrong guy. Steve, Giroux isn't working for LAFC. Right. Moving on.
Yep.
Like, can you be gutsy enough to admit it didn't work? Great idea. Hasn't worked. Let's move on.
Well,
not burn 3 or 4 seasons with it not working.
Well, especially because they paid $5 million cash for him. If you could get $4 million for him, recover most of that investment, and maybe there's an MLS team that would really love to have Lucio Acosta for a playoff run for the second half of the season. That would totally make sense to me.
It's tough. You have to make an internal evaluation about which way is the way to go, or has it been a mistake? And it's tough to admit when you spend a lot of money that we got it wrong, or it just sometimes it's like, again, you can have a great concept that just doesn't pay off in reality. And how long do you want to drag it out before you just admit it didn't work and try something different?
I really want Dan Hunt to make a choice between whether he is committed to making this a competitive team working to finish as high as it can in a particular season, or is he trying to start over from scratch and, for lack of a better term, do a rebuild? Because for the last 3 seasons, this has consistently felt like somewhere stuck in the middle. Yeah. And when you're in that position, as you said earlier, you end up with a team that is neither good at attacking or defending.
Yeah. Well, they've never called it a rebuild. They always say the playoffs the minimum. Right. We're the ones that think it's a rebuild because we look at the roster and we said, what are you talking about, the playoffs are the minimum? Yeah. Look at this roster that you have that doesn't fit together.
Yeah, the real problem is, and this just kind of put a bow on this, goes back to the conversation we've been having about all the other incoming opportunities and options, which is one of the greatest fears I have had, and I talked about this when this was announced, that when the Hunts decided to embark on this insane stadium rebuild project where they continue to play in a stadium while they literally tear it down around the games, not for 1 season, but for 3 seasons, is that if the on-field product continued to be so bad, by the time they're done in 2028, with all these other new options that have popped up in the Metroplex for your soccer dollar, it could be South Lake 2.0 all over again.
Yeah.
There really is a high risk of this high wire act they've tried to pull off with this stadium and how they're going about putting on their on-field product.
Well, it was just the 4th of July game, with usually in the full stadium is packed to the walls, 100% butts in the seats. Yesterday, with like 11,000 seats available, it was like 75, 80% full to my eyes. So it's maybe already signs on the wall that that's happening, Peter. Of course, there was some weather, so we'll admit that.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, Buzz, thank you so much. You can go find Buzz's stuff on his website, his podcast, thirddegree.net. He is the original soccer influencer himself. All right, as I said, Andy is back next week. We will cover the Gold Cup, Club World Cup, all kinds of good stuff. Hear from him. Thanks to Lars for his service today. And don't forget, you can find us on our website, thekickaround.com. Thank you, Buzz. P1s, we love and adore you. Get stuck in. Win your 50s.
Broadcasting live from the TXU Energy Mothership at Victory Plaza, hard by the AAC. This is Sports Radio 96.7 and 1310, The Tick. KTCK AM Dallas Fort Worth, KTCK FM Flower Mound, a Cumulus station.